Have you ever noticed that the calmer you become, the more uncomfortable certain people get? Not because you said something wrong, but because you didn't say anything at all. Because you didn't react, didn't explain yourself, didn't mirror their emotional energy. And most people never realize this, but calmness is not neutral. Calmness is contrast. And contrast exposes everything standing next to it. Because when you remain grounded while someone else is emotionally reactive, impatient, defensive, or chaotic, your calm presence becomes a silent comparison. And comparisons make insecure people deeply uncomfortable. Because emotional people survive through shared energy. They regulate themselves by pulling others into their emotional state. And when you refuse to participate, when you don't match their tone, don't rush your words, don't justify your position, something inside them feels threatened, not by your actions, but by your restraint. Because silence creates psychological pressure, and unlike words, silence has no clear target, no obvious angle to attack, and that uncertainty causes tension. Because the human mind hates not knowing where it stands, hates not knowing whether it's being judged, challenged, or dismissed. And when you offer no emotional signals, their imagination fills the gap, often with their own fears, insecurities, and projections. Which is why calm reveals emotional contrast so clearly. Because if someone is stable, your calm feels safe. But if someone is unstable, your calm feels accusatory, even when you accuse them of nothing. And this is why emotionally reactive people often label calm individuals as cold, arrogant, detached, or distant. Not because calmness is those things, but because it denies them emotional validation. And validation is the currency of emotional chaos. Because chaos requires participation. It needs engagement, reaction, escalation. And when none of that arrives, the chaos collapses inward, forcing the person to sit with their own feelings, something many people desperately avoid. And this is why calmness feels like pressure, because it removes distraction, it removes noise, and it exposes what remains underneath. And this is where discomfort begins. Because emotional people often don't realize how dependent they are on external reactions to regulate themselves. And when you don't give them that reaction, they feel powerless because they've lost emotional leverage. And leverage is how weak minds try to control situations, by provoking responses, by triggering explanations, by baiting reactions. Because if they can make you react, they can influence you. But when you remain calm, when you don't escalate, when you don't explain yourself excessively, when you don't chase misunderstanding, their usual tactics fail. And failure makes people hostile, because hostility is often the last defense of insecurity. And this is why calmness feels like a threat, because it removes their ability to steer the emotional direction of the interaction. And without control, they feel exposed. Because control was never strength, it was compensation. And the silent samurai understood this deeply. Because true calm is not passive, it is disciplined, it is intentional, it is trained, and it communicates something without words. It communicates that you are internally regulated, that you do not need external validation, that your emotions are not easily hijacked, and that alone is unsettling to people who live reactively. Because your non-reaction denies them feedback, denies them reassurance, denies them confirmation that they matter emotionally in that moment. And this absence feels like rejection, even when no rejection exists. And so they project, they accuse, they provoke, because they are trying to restore emotional balance by pulling you down to their level. Because when everyone is reactive, no one feels exposed. But when one person remains calm, the imbalance becomes obvious. And calmness becomes a mirror, reflecting their lack of control back at them. And mirrors are uncomfortable when we don't like what we see. And this is why silence creates psychological pressure, because it forces self-reflection. And most people would rather fight, argue, or blame than sit quietly with themselves. And this is why calm people are often misunderstood, because society associates power with loudness, dominance with aggression, and confidence with constant expression.
But true dominance doesn't announce itself, it stabilizes itself. And this is where the silent samurai effect begins, because the warrior does not enter the battlefield shouting. He enters grounded, present, and observant, because before any strike is made, presence alone can shift the energy of a room. And when you master calm, you don't need to prove anything, because proof invites challenge, and challenge invites chaos. But calm denies entry altogether. And this is why calm cannot be ignored, because it refuses to play the game. And when the game stops working, the players panic. And this panic often disguises itself as criticism, mockery, hostility, or discomfort directed at you. But it is never about you. It is about what your calm reveals inside them. And once you understand this, you stop apologizing for your restraint. You stop explaining your silence, and you stop mistaking their discomfort for your responsibility. Because calm is not something you owe anyone an explanation for. It is something you cultivate as inner authority, and authority does not negotiate with emotional noise.
Calm people unsettle others first, because calm removes emotional control, and emotional control is the primary weapon of weak minds. Because when someone cannot dominate through confidence, discipline, or inner stability, they attempt to dominate through reactions, tone, pressure, urgency, guilt, or chaos. And these tactics only work if you take the bait, because escalation requires two participants, manipulation requires engagement, and drama requires response. But calm people offer no hooks, no escalation, no emotional entry points. And this is deeply frustrating to anyone who relies on emotional leverage to feel powerful, because without your reaction, they cannot steer the interaction, cannot provoke validation, and cannot anchor their identity against yours. And when this leverage disappears, insecurity surfaces quickly, which leads to the second reason calm unsettles others, because calm forces self-reflection, and silence is a mirror that does not distort. Because when you remain quiet, composed, and grounded, while someone else is agitated, defensive, or aggressive, the contrast exposes their behavior without accusation, and this exposure is intolerable for people who avoid self-awareness. Because instead of confronting themselves, they project outward, labeling you as cold, distant, passive-aggressive, arrogant, or emotionless. Not because those labels are accurate, but because projection is easier than introspection. And this is why calm often attracts hostility, because hostility is an attempt to break the mirror, to shatter the reflection, to force you into a reaction, so they no longer feel alone with their instability. And this leads to the third reason calm intimidates, because calm signals self-mastery, and self-mastery is the most threatening signal in any social environment, because it communicates emotional independence, internal regulation, and the ability to remain stable under pressure. And people instinctively respect or resent what they cannot replicate, because calmness suggests that you are not controlled by circumstances, opinions, or emotional contagion. And this non-reactivity reads as power, because power is not how loudly you speak, but how little you are moved by noise. And in a world addicted to stimulation, reaction, and validation, emotional restraint feels unnatural, almost offensive, because it denies the social contract of emotional exchange. And this breaks social scripts, which is the fourth reason calm unsettles others. Because most interactions follow predictable patterns. Someone provokes, someone responds, someone escalates, someone explains, someone apologizes, someone defends. And when you refuse to play your expected role, confusion increases, tension rises, and uncertainty spreads. Because people don't know how to position themselves around you, and uncertainty creates anxiety, and anxiety often turns into aggression, sarcasm, or passive hostility, because people crave predictability, and calm individuals are unpredictable only because they refuse emotional autopilot. And this unpredictability destabilizes those who depend on routine emotional patterns to feel safe. And the fifth reason calm cannot be attacked directly is because calm offers no surface area, no argument to dismantle, no drama to exploit, no emotional cracks to widen, because attacks require friction, and calm creates none. So aggression collapses into itself, leaving the aggressor exposed, frustrated, and powerless, which is why calm often ends arguments before they begin, not because you won, but because there was nothing to fight against. And this principle is deeply rooted in samurai philosophy, because the silent samurai understood that still water reflects everything clearly, while disturbed water distorts. And before battle, the warrior's presence alone could intimidate opponents, because calm communicates readiness, discipline, and certainty, whereas aggression often masks fear, impatience, and lack of control. And this is why calm intimidates more than anger, because anger is predictable, but calm is unreadable, and unreadable opponents are dangerous. Yet most people lose their calm not because they lack discipline, but because of ego hooks. Because the ego wants to be understood, respected, validated, and correctly perceived. And when someone misunderstands you, insults you, or challenges you, the ego demands explanation, defense, or correction. But explanation is often a trap, because it signals insecurity, and insecurity invites further pressure. And emotional baiting works only when you fear misinterpretation, because when you fear being seen incorrectly, you surrender control. And this is why emotional people provoke, because they know most people cannot tolerate being misjudged. But the silent samurai understands that clarity does not come from explanation, it comes from consistency, and calm is consistency under pressure. And maintaining silent calm is not passive. It is trained through slow speech that removes urgency, minimal explanations that deny leverage, neutral facial control that prevents emotional leakage, and physical grounding that anchors the nervous system. Because calm is physiological before it is psychological, and this is where Stoic alignment becomes essential. Because as the Stoics understood, you always own the option of having no opinion, no reaction, no internal disturbance. Because emotional contagion only spreads when you allow it entry, and the inner citadel is built by refusing to outsource your emotional state to external behavior. Because when you detach from emotional chaos, you are not cold, you are sovereign. And sovereignty makes people uncomfortable because it exposes their dependency. And this leads to the final understanding that a silent samurai does not seek to intimidate, but his calm presence naturally unsettles those who rely on chaos to feel powerful. Because calm removes leverage, exposes insecurity, and reflects emotional imbalance without a single word. And when you learn to remain grounded while others escalate, you reclaim control without confrontation. And this is why calmness is misunderstood as coldness, because people expect reactions, not restraint. And if your calm makes someone uncomfortable, it is not your responsibility to fix their discomfort. It is proof that your inner discipline is stronger than their emotional noise. And the moment you stop explaining your calm, defending your silence, or apologizing for your restraint, you step fully into the silent samurai effect, where presence replaces performance, stillness replaces struggle, and power no longer needs permission.
At a certain point, you realize that calm is not something you perform for others. It is something you inhabit for yourself. And this realization changes how you move through the world. Because once you understand that your calm is not meant to be understood, validated, or appreciated by everyone, you stop leaking energy trying to manage other people's emotions. And this is where real power begins. Because most people are exhausted not from effort, but from emotional management, from explaining themselves, defending their intentions, softening their presence, and diluting their boundaries to keep others comfortable.
And the silent samurai refuses this burden, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity, because clarity understands that emotional discomfort is often the price of growth. And when others feel unsettled by your calm, it is because your presence disrupts the emotional hierarchy they rely on. Because many social environments are built on invisible agreements of reaction, noise, and emotional reciprocity. And when you opt out, you unintentionally challenge the structure itself. And structures resist collapse, which is why calm individuals often face subtle resistance, passive aggression, labeling, or social friction. Because your stillness forces others to confront the reality that their power was never internal, it was borrowed from reaction, and borrowed power collapses when no one lends it energy. And this is where calm becomes transformative, because it reveals that dominance does not come from winning arguments, controlling rooms, or asserting opinions, but from emotional self-ownership, from the ability to remain steady regardless of external volatility. And this steadiness rewires how people perceive you, because humans subconsciously rank stability as authority, and authority as safety or threat, depending on their own internal state. And those who lack internal order perceive your calm as threat, while those who possess it recognize it as strength. And this division is unavoidable, because calm acts as a filter, separating those aligned with discipline from those addicted to chaos. And this is why calm people often find their social circles changing over time, not because they rejected others, but because others could no longer feed off their emotional energy. And this natural distancing is not loss, it is alignment, because the silent samurai does not chase belonging, he attracts resonance, and resonance only forms when frequencies match. And emotional noise cannot coexist with grounded presence for long, because noise requires amplification, while calm requires nothing. And as you embody this calm more deeply, you notice that conflicts resolve themselves without your intervention, that provocations lose momentum, that manipulative tactics feel almost transparent, and that your responses become slower, fewer, and more intentional, because you no longer react to be seen, you act only when action serves purpose. And this restraint confuses those who equate silence with weakness, because weakness seeks validation, while strength is self-contained. And this misunderstanding is where calm is most often mislabeled, because society rewards expressiveness, oversharing, emotional immediacy, and constant opinion, while discipline operates quietly, invisibly, and patiently. And patience terrifies impulsive minds, because patience implies confidence in outcome, and confidence without urgency feels threatening to those who need immediate feedback to feel secure. And this is why calm people are often tested, pushed, or baited, because emotional individuals are subconsciously searching for proof that you are like them, that you can be rattled, provoked, or pulled into reaction. And when that proof never arrives, frustration builds, because your calm denies them psychological relief. And this frustration is often misdirected as criticism, gossip, or hostility, but none of it penetrates calm, because calm has no ego exposed, and ego is the only entry point for emotional attack. And this is why Stoic philosophy aligns so precisely with the silent samurai path, because the Stoics understood that suffering does not come from events, but from attachment to interpretation. And when you release the need to interpret every interaction emotionally, you regain control, because you stop assigning meaning where none is required, and you stop personalizing reactions that have nothing to do with you. And this detachment is not indifference, it is precision, because precision conserves energy, and energy conserved becomes presence, and presence changes outcomes without force. And this is the deepest layer of calm, the layer most people never reach, because it requires surrendering the illusion that you must be understood to be effective, respected, or powerful. And once you let go of this illusion, your calm becomes unshakable, because it is no longer reactive, it is rooted. And rooted calm cannot be rushed, baited, or destabilized. And this is when you fully embody the silent samurai effect, not as a technique, but as a state of being, where your silence is not empty, it is deliberate, where your restraint is not weakness, it is selection, and where your calm is not passive, it is dominant. Because dominance at this level does not impose itself, it stabilizes the environment around it, forcing chaos either to dissolve or to remove itself. And if your calm continues to make others uncomfortable, let it, because discomfort is often the first signal that an old emotional order is breaking down, and you are no longer required to maintain systems that depend on your reaction to survive. Because the silent samurai does not seek to control others, he controls himself, and in doing so, he becomes immovable. And what cannot be moved does not need to fight, explain, or prove anything at all.
Eventually, there comes a moment where you no longer ask whether your calm is being misunderstood because you understand that misunderstanding is irrelevant. And this is the final threshold most people never cross because they remain emotionally available for interpretation, explanation, and negotiation, while the silent samurai withdraws from that marketplace entirely, not out of bitterness, but out of mastery. Because once you realize that most conflict is sustained not by disagreement, but by emotional participation, you see clearly that calm is not avoidance, it is refusal. A refusal to outsource your nervous system to unstable environments. And this refusal is what makes calm untouchable, because untouchable does not mean isolated, it means internally sealed. And this seal changes how life responds to you, because people sense when they can no longer manipulate, rush, provoke, or guilt you into reaction. And when those tools stop working, they either evolve or retreat. And this is the natural conclusion of the silent samurai path, because calm reorganizes social dynamics without confrontation, without speeches, without threats, simply through consistency. And consistency exposes everything built on fluctuation, and this exposure often feels like loss to those who depended on your emotional availability, because when you stop feeding chaos, chaos starves, and starving systems fight before they collapse, which is why you may experience a final wave of testing, accusations, or pressure as you solidify this state. But this is not a sign to retreat, it is confirmation that your calm is working. Because true power always provokes resistance before it becomes accepted. And once this phase passes, a new equilibrium forms, one where your presence alone sets the emotional temperature of the room, not because you dominate others, but because you dominate yourself. And self-dominance radiates outward, forcing environments to adjust. And this is where the final misunderstanding dissolves, because calm was never meant to be comforting to everyone. It was meant to be stabilizing to those who can handle it and revealing to those who cannot. And this distinction matters, because trying to make your calm universally palatable weakens it, and weak calm is no longer calm, it is appeasement, and appeasement invites disrespect, whereas disciplined calm commands it silently. And this is why the silent samurai does not soften his presence to make others feel safe, because safety built on emotional dependency is fragile, and fragile systems collapse under pressure, while calm systems endure. And this endurance is what ultimately defines authority, because authority that needs constant reinforcement is not authority, it is insecurity. And the calm that survives misunderstanding, accusation, and silence without collapsing is the calm that cannot be taken from you. And when you reach this point, you no longer need to prove that calm is power, because your life reflects it. Your interactions simplify, your conflicts shorten, your reactions disappear, and your energy returns to you. And this return is the true reward, because you are no longer scattered across other people's expectations. And this is the conclusion most people avoid, because it requires letting go of being liked, understood, and emotionally included. But what you gain in return is sovereignty, clarity, and psychological freedom. And this is why the silent samurai remains calm even when misunderstood, because he knows that calm is not a social strategy, it is an inner position, and positions do not argue, they hold. And as you stand in this position long enough, the world reorganizes around it, removing what cannot coexist and strengthening what can.
And if your calm continues to unsettle weak people, let it. Because discomfort is not harm, it is exposure. And exposure is the beginning of truth. And the truth is simple, that calm is not passive, it is dominant. Not loud, but absolute. Not aggressive, but immovable. And once you understand this, you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop negotiating your peace, and you step fully into the silent samurai effect, where your presence speaks without words, your silence ends conflicts before they begin, and your calm becomes the final line that nothing unstable can cross. Because what is truly powerful does not chase, convince, or confront, it remains, and everything else must adjust.